Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually we are wading through, white papers, tech specs, or these dense historical biographies.
Yeah, very dense.
But today we are looking at a piece of literature that is probably sitting on a second grader's bookshelf as we speak.
It's a true childhood icon. I mean, I'd argue he's one of the most recognizable figures in, modern American children's literature.
We are talking about Stanley Lambchop,
Yeah.
the boy who was flattened by a bulletin board and, well, lived to tell the tale.
He certainly did.
Specifically, we are analyzing Flat Stanley's Worldwide Adventures, Book No. 5, The Amazing Mexican Secret. And before you tune out thinking this is just some bedtime story recap, I want to be really clear about our mission here.
Right. We are taking this text, which was created by Jeff Brown and written by Josh Greenhut, and we're treating it as a serious cultural artifact. Because when you actually strip away the illustrations and the big font, you find this surprisingly dense narrative about the hero's journey, the physics of aerodynamics, the ethics of culinary appropriation, and a philosophical lesson that is. I mean, it's genuinely profound.
It's so much heavier than I expected going in. I mean, we have bullfighting, we have Mayan astronomy, we have a villain who I think represents this very specific kind of modern anxiety.
Oh, for sure.
But let's start with the premise. For anyone who might be uninitiated, could you set the scene for us? How does a regular kid become an envelope-sized international traveler?
Well, the inciting incident for the whole franchise is a furniture accident. A huge bulletin board just falls on Stanley while he's sleeping.
Which in any other book is a tragedy.
Exactly. It's a tragedy. But in this universe, it's an evolution. He becomes half an inch thick. He basically defies all known biology.
He becomes a two-dimensional object living in a three-dimensional world.
That's it, precisely. And that physical alteration becomes the engine for the entire plot. He's not just a character anymore. He's a logistical marvel. He can slide under doors.
He can be used as a kite.
Right. But most importantly, for this specific book, he can be mailed. He's like a living loophole in the modern travel industry.
Which brings us to the lamb chop kitchen.
Yeah.
Because the story doesn't start in Mexico. It starts with breakfast.
Yeah.
And I think this opening scene is actually crucial because it sets up the whole family dynamic.
It really does. They're all eating huevos rancheros. And the text even takes a moment to define this, eggs on a tortilla, which is our first little clue that this book is going to be acting as a kind of cultural bridge for the reader.
But the focus isn't really the eggs, is it? It's the flavor.
It's all about the flavor. Mrs. Lambchop has used this special spice given to her by their neighbor, Carlos, and the reaction from the family is it's visceral. They're losing their minds over how good these eggs taste.
And this is where we get the hook.
This is the hook. Carlos reveals this isn't some store-bought chili powder. It's a secret ingredient that's been passed down from his great-grandmother, La Abuela.
But there's a problem.
A massive problem. La Abuela is 103 years old. She lives completely off the grid in a remote part of Mexico, no phone. And she absolutely does not trust the postal service.
And then Carlos drops this line that is, it's surprisingly dark for a breakfast conversation. He says, when she dies, the secret will go with her.
It's heavy, right? It immediately introduces this concept of ephemeral knowledge. In our digital age, we just assume everything is on the cloud. It's backed up, it's archived forever.
Right.
But this story posits that true value, true knowledge can still be lost. It creates this immediate sense of urgency. And Mrs. Lambchop, who clearly views cooking as a very serious art form, decides it's unacceptable. The secret has to be preserved.
So they need a messenger. And this is where the unique economics of Flat Stanley come into play. They could, buy a plane ticket.
They could.
But Mrs. Lambchop looks at her flat son and basically sees a living postage stamp.
It's so utilitarian, isn't it? She's incredibly pragmatic. Why spend hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars on airfare when you can just fold your child into an envelope?
But you have to notice the dynamic with the brother, Arthur.
Oh, yeah.
Arthur is the normal kid. He's round, he's three-dimensional, and he is so jealous.
He volunteers immediately. He's like, send me, I'll go. He wants the adventure so badly. But he's disqualified by his own physics. He just can't fit in the mailbox.
And that sets up this recurring tension where Stanley's disability, his flatness, is actually his superpower, while Arthur's normality is, in this case, a limitation.
Totally. And before Stanley leaves, there's this little scene where they're playing a game in the hallway that completely foreshadows the entire climax of the book.
Bullfighting.
Bullfighting. Carlos is the matador, Arthur is playing the bull, and Stanley is the cape.
So he's basically being used as a prop, right? That's a bit of a degradation, isn't it?
It completely objectifies him, literally. But it also establishes the mechanics of how he interacts with the world, with wind and motion. Carlos is swinging him around, and there's a critical little detail planted here.
They're red sweatpants.
The red sweatpants. Stanley wears them because he believes that old myth that the color red makes bulls angry.
Which has to be one of the most pervasive myths in the entire animal kingdom.
It is, and the authors plant it here very specifically so they can dismantle it later on. So Stanley gets folded up. He's tucked into an envelope with some tortillas for snacking, which is a nice touch.
A very considerate touch.
And he's dropped in the mailbox. Next stop, Mexico City.
I really want to talk about his arrival because the fantasy of travel by mail usually just ends with, and then he was there. But the book drops him right at the Plaza de Toros, Mexico.
The largest bull ring in the world. It's absolutely immense. And Stanley doesn't arrive like some kind of conquering hero. He arrives like a piece of junk mail. He's crumpled, he's thirsty, he's disoriented.
And there's such a stark contrast here. The text makes a point of mentioning that he's famous. He saved President Lincoln's nose on Mount Rushmore. He's apparently big in Japan. But here, in this moment, he's just a flat kid in a huge, unfamiliar city.
Yeah, he steps out of that envelope expecting, adulation, and instead he meets Carmen del Unco. She's Carlos's cousin, and she's a famous matador, and she is not impressed.
Not at all. In fact, she's paranoid.
Totally paranoid. She immediately accuses him of being a spy. Who sent you? It suggests that this secret ingredient isn't just some quaint family recipe. It's a valuable trade secret that people are actively trying to steal.
It frames the whole culinary world as, like, high-stakes industrial espionage.
It does, and Stanley has to produce his papers, literally a letter from Carlos, just to prove that he isn't a thief. It's this funny little lesson in bureaucracy. You're only as good as your documentation.
Carmen eventually accepts his story, but she's busy. She has to practice. So she sends him up into the stands to watch. And this leads directly to the first major action set piece of the book.
The bull ring incident. Right. And this scene is so pivotal because it shows us the real danger of his condition. It's not all fun and games. Stanley gets excited, he leans too far over the railing, and he falls into the ring. And suddenly, he is face to face with a live bull, a 1,000-pound animal charging at a boy who's basically made of paper and bone.
And he just freezes.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a gadget. He doesn't have a clever plan. He's helpless.
Carmen saves him. And she doesn't do it by, distracting the bull or anything like that. She physically picks Stanley up with one hand and just hoists him overhead as the bull rushes right past them.
And right away, you see she's a total pro. She's not a damsel. She is the protector. She turns what was a near-death experience for Stanley into a photo op for the press.
It's a huge moment of humbling for Stanley. He's usually the one doing the saving. But here, he's baggage. He's the one who needs to be looked after. And that vulnerability, I think, carries over directly into the next section, which for me is the real emotional heart of the book, the fiesta.
So they go to Carmen's family home. It's a huge party. Lots of food, lots of relatives everywhere. And we get some more of that linguistic education here.
We do, yeah. The book just seamlessly integrates Spanish phrases. An older woman at the party calls Stanley liso como un plato.
Which means smooth as the plate.
Yeah.
Or, flat as a pancake.
Exactly. And Stanley learns that bienvenidos means welcome. It's this really nice organic way of learning. But the real action here is with the local kids. They start asking Stanley about his life, his adventures, and Stanley, well, he lies.
He doesn't lie about what happened, exactly, but he lies about how it happened. He edits the story.
That's a great way to put it. He retells his famous adventures fighting museum thieves, saving the day in California, but he completely scrubs his brother Arthur out of the narrative. He presents himself as a solo act, a superhero.
Why does he do that, though? He's already unique. He's already famous. Why does he feel the need to also be invincible?
I think it's the pressure of the persona, He feels like he has to live up to the Flat Stanley brand. He thinks that if he admits he had help or that he was scared, that he somehow becomes less valuable. He's prioritizing his ego over his reality.
And the karma is instant.
Oh, it's immediate. The kids hear this and they decide, hey, if this kid is a superhero made of rubber, he can handle anything. So they take him over to a tree.
The piñata incident, which is, when you think about it, a terrifying concept. They blindfold a little girl, they give her a big stick, and they hoist Stanley up by his ankles. They're going to beat him with a stick because he told them he was tough enough to handle it.
So his lie basically comes back to bite him, literally. The facade he built is about to get cracked, wide open.
And Stanley just breaks. He can't keep it up. He screams, "Stop! You're going to hurt me!" And it brings the whole party to a screeching halt.
He has to confess. He says, I am not made of rubber. I can get hurt. I should have been honest with you.
And that right there is the critical takeaway for the young reader. Vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's actually a safety mechanism. By admitting that he's fragile, he stops the immediate danger.
But more importantly, it completely shifts the dynamic with the other kids. Eduardo, who's the leader of the group, doesn't mock him. He sympathizes with him.
They realize he isn't a toy, he's a boy. And because he was finally honest, they decide to help him. They reveal that they actually know where La Abuela is.
It's such a great lesson. If he had kept up the lie, he would have ended up bruised and, completely lost. But because he told the truth, he gains guides. They agree to take him out of the city and into the jungle.
And this is where the book shifts genres, really. We move from a kind of urban drama to a full-on archaeological adventure.
Absolutely. The trek is grueling. Stanley can't be mailed to this location. He has to walk. And eventually they arrive at this incredible Mayan temple.
And it's not just a ruin, it's a home. The book uses Eduardo to drop some really heavy historical context here.
Yeah, he explains that the Maya were not just some ancient people, they were scientists. They had a calendar that was more accurate than the Roman one. They calculated the solar year of the planet Venus.
It grounds La Abuela in this lineage of serious intellect. She isn't just a wise old woman trope. She is a descendant of astronomers and mathematicians who is living on top of their monument.
But just as we're soaking in all this amazing history, we get the antagonists. And I love these villains because they are so wonderfully out of place.
Chef Lulu of Bourgogne.
And his sous chefs, Reynaldo and Patrice. They step out of the dense, humid Mexican jungle wearing these pristine, starch-white chef uniforms and toques, the tall hats.
It's visually absurd, but what do they represent in the story?
I think they represent the commodification of culture. Chef Lulu is obsessed with perfection. He spent 9 years of his life hunting for this secret ingredient. He doesn't care about the history or La Abuela or the Mayan culture.
He wants the product.
He wants the product. He wants to extract the value and sell it in his fancy restaurant in France. He's the gatekeeper who thinks he deserves the secret simply because he's a professional.
So he captures Stanley, and the book says he tucks him under his arm like a baguette, which is a great image, and he starts marching up the pyramid.
This leads to the big showdown on the steps. Carmen catches up to them. And this fight scene is just a masterclass in, non-violent resistance.
Carmen doesn't throw a single punch.
She doesn't have to. She's a matador. She understands flow and momentum. The two sous chefs charge at her, and she just uses the Veronica, this slow, elegant movement of the cape. She sidesteps, she wiggles her hips, she lets their own aggression throw them completely off balance.
It's almost like Aikido.
It's physics again. It's all about the conservation of momentum. But she still has to deal with the main boss, Lulu, who's still got Stanley. And this is where the team-up happens. Carmen grabs Stanley's hands, and she starts to spin him.
She uses him as a weapon.
She uses him as a projectile weapon. Or maybe a liver. She spins him around, and his flat feet catch the chef right in the chest, knocking him all the way down the stairs. Zut alors.
Indeed. The villains are dispatched, just tumbling down the pyramid.
So the path is clear. They finally reach the top, but then the geography throws this huge curveball. The pyramid just ends. It's a cliff.
A sheer drop into a pool of water far, far below. And this is the moment where the book stops being just an adventure story and it starts being a philosophy textbook. Carmen stops the other kids from going any further. She says only Stanley can go.
Why just Stanley?
Because the next leg of the journey requires something that only he possesses. But before he goes, Carmen shares her own trauma. She tells him this story about crying as a little girl because she wanted to be a matador, but the world told her that was a man's job. She felt like her own biology was wrong.
And then she drops the line that, for me, defines the entire book.
It is not what you have that matters. It is what you do with it.
Wow. That is a heavy, heavy concept to drop into a book for a 7-year-old reader. It completely reframes the entire narrative. Stanley has spent, 5 books thinking his flatness is this freak accident, this weird condition he has to deal with.
Right.
Carmen is telling him it's a neutral attribute. It's just a tool. The value isn't in the shape of his body. The value is in how he chooses to apply that shape to the world around him.
So he has to jump. A normal, round kid falls like a rock. What does Stanley do?
He applies the lesson immediately. He dives. He positions his body like a needle, minimizing his surface area to reduce drag. He just slices through the air and then slices into the water.
But then he's underwater. He swims into a dark cave. He's running out of air.
And now he faces the exact opposite problem. He needs to stay on the surface of the water inside the cave to breathe the little bit of air that's trapped at the ceiling. So what does he do? He flips over. He maximizes his surface area. He becomes a raft.
He goes from a needle to a pancake.
Yeah.
He's actively modulating his own physics to suit the environment he's in.
He survives because he adapts. The current sweeps him out of the cave, and he washes up in this beautiful, hidden valley, a sanctuary.
And there she is, La Abuela.
Tiny, ancient, wearing this beautiful, colorful dress. And she says something amazing. She says, I have been waiting for someone like you. It feels very chosen one.
It does. But the moment is completely ruined because splash, 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 the chefs are back.
They had scuba gear. You have to admire their commitment. Lulu is just relentless. He storms the little cottage. He tears the blankets off the bed. He's screaming, where is the secret? Where is it?
And then he looks out the window and he sees a field of herbs. He runs out, he grabs a handful, he crushes it, smells it, and his face just falls.
He is absolutely devastated. He identifies the plant immediately. It's cilantro, or, coriander.
The stuff you can buy at any supermarket for 99 cents.
Lulu just starts weeping. He says, it is the most common spice in all of Mexican cooking. This isn't a secret. He feels completely cheated. He spent 9 years and who knows how much money searching for some magical rare plant.
And it turns out to be a weed that grows everywhere.
So he leaves. He just walks away in disgrace. He assumes La Abuela is a fraud.
He completely misses the point.
Entirely. He's a materialist. He thinks the value is in the object. If the object is common, he assumes it's worthless.
But Stanley stays behind. And he asks the obvious question. So, if that's just cilantro, what's the secret?
And La Abuela just laughs. She repeats the mantra, the secret is not the ingredient, it is what you do with it.
So break down the actual chemistry for us. What does she actually do?
It's brilliant. She takes the cilantro, she puts it on Stanley's flat arms, literally using him as a preparation surface, and then she adds salt. And then she rubs it.
She applies friction.
Exactly. In culinary terms, she's bruising the herb. When you chop cilantro with a knife, you're just severing the cells. But when you rub it with an abrasive like salt, with friction, you break down the cell walls much more completely. You release the essential oils. You mix them with the mineral salt. You're creating a chemical reaction that releases an aroma you simply can't get just by chopping.
So the secret was never a noun. It was a verb. It was the technique.
It was the process. Chef Lulu failed because he was looking for a thing to buy. La Abuela succeeded because she had a method to practice.
And the smell wafts up, and Stanley recognizes it immediately. It's the smell of home. It's the smell of the eggs from the very first chapter.
Mission accomplished. He has the secret.
Yeah.
But the book still has one loose end it needs to tie up.
The bullfight.
The bullfight.
Right. So we cut to 4 days later. Stanley is back at the Plaza de Toros. But he isn't in the stands this time.
Nope. He is in the ring. He's wearing a custom satin spandex jumpsuit. He looks like a giant human-shaped piece of red paper.
And this is where we finally get the big fact check on the red pants myth from the beginning of the story.
Carmen explains it very clearly to him. She says, bulls are colorblind. They don't see the color red. They don't hate red. They react to the movement, the fluttering of the cape.
Which Stanley, being flat and light, can do better than anyone or anything.
So the bull charges. And just as the action is about to peak, an interruption.
A scream from the stands. Stop that bull! It's his mom.
The whole Lamb Chop clan has arrived. Mr. and Mrs. Lamb Chop and Arthur, too. They flew down in a complete panic because Stanley hadn't called home in a week.
Which, to be fair, is pretty bad form on Stanley's part. You can't just go off the grid when you're 7 years old and in a foreign country.
Right. Mrs. Lamb Chop is terrified. She sees her son in a ring with this giant beast. But Carmen steps in. She's so calm. She reassures the mother. She promises to keep him safe. And then the family sits down to watch the performance.
And it really is a performance. It's not a fight. It's a dance. Stanley and Carmen just flow around the bull together.
And Arthur, the jealous brother from the beginning, he's watching this. And he doesn't sulk. He says, that is cool.
It's a great moment of reconciliation. He finally accepts that his brother can do things that he can't, and he appreciates it rather than resenting it.
And the epilogue brings us right back to the bedroom. They're home. The boys are playing their game again. But the roles have shifted. Now, Carlos is the chef, and Arthur is the bullfighter.
And Stanley pins a photo of his adventure right onto the bulletin board. The very same object that crushed him in the first place.
It's a complete conquering of trauma, isn't it? He uses the instrument of his accident to display his triumph. And he pins a note right next to the photo. The secret is not the ingredient, it is what you do with it.
And then the smell of lunch. That familiar secret smell wafts down the hall. Everything is back to normal, but everyone's perspective has shifted.
And that's the deep dive value of this book. It genuinely leaves the reader with a toolkit for looking at the world in a different way.
You mentioned earlier that the book is also stealthily educational in other ways. We've touched on the language and the Mayan history.
It's relentless with the facts, but it hides them in the fun. There's a section at the back called More Amazing Mexican Secrets that highlights things the story only touched on, like the geography of the Ring of Fire and the volcanoes like Popocatépetl.
Yeah, I didn't realize until I read those notes that the colors of the Mexican flag had such specific meanings.
Green for hope and victory, white for purity, and red for the blood of heroes. It adds this layer of solemnity to the setting. It treats Mexico not just as a fun vacation spot, but as a nation with a complex and sometimes violent history.
And it also really emphasizes the diversity. It makes a point of mentioning that while Spanish is the dominant language, there are over 60 indigenous languages spoken: Nahuatl, Zapotec, Maya. It paints a picture of a country that is a tapestry, not a monolith.
And for a kid reading this in Ohio or, Manchester, that is a vital expansion of their worldview.
So let's try to synthesize all this. We have a story about a flat boy, but really what we have is a story about agency.
That's the perfect word for it, agency. Chef Lulu lacked agency because he thought the power was in the external object, the rare herb. Carmen and La Abuela possessed agency because they knew the power came from their internal technique.
And Stanley finds his own agency by finally accepting his condition, not as a flaw, but as a tool.
Exactly. If he had stayed up in the stands just wishing he was round, he would have been miserable. Instead, he started asking, what can I do with this flatness? And the answer was, I can fly, I can slide under doors, I can float, and I can dance with bulls.
It's such a powerful message for anyone, really. I mean, we all have things about ourselves that feel like limitations. Maybe you feel like you don't have the budget or the right degree or the connections you need.
But the message here is that you probably already have the cilantro. You have the raw materials, they're common, everyone has them. The real question is, are you just chopping them up the same way as everyone else? Or are you applying the friction? Are you finding the unique technique that releases the true flavor?
That is a fantastic place to leave it. Sometimes the biggest adventures really do come in the flattest packages.
And sometimes the secret is just knowing how to rub the salt.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the amazing Mexican secret. We will catch you on the next one. Keep unfolding those layers.